بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم لا حول ولا قوة الا بالله العلی العظیم الحمد لله رب العالمین و صلی الله علی سیدنا و نبینا ابی القاسم المصطفى محمد و آله الطیبین الطاهرین لا سیما بقیة الله فی الارضین عجل الله تعالی فرجه الشریف. اللهم اخرجنی من ظلمات الوهم و اکرمنی بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا ابواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك یا ارحم الراحمین. خب الحمدلله we have توفیق to continue our study of اصول فلسفه و روش realism by the late علامه طباطبایی with commentaries of Ayatollah Mutahhari. Today we start the fourth article or essay or section of the book, and this is about ilm wa ma'loom, about knowledge and what is known. At the beginning, Ayatollah Mutahhari has a detailed and informative introduction before we start with the text of Allama Tabatabai. And today we will focus on this introduction because it's long and has many points. He says that we have already talked about the value of knowledge to some extent in previous sections of the book, and in particular in the second article of the book, when Allama replied and responded to the questions raised by idealists. He argued for the validity and reliability of human knowledge in general. And Ayatollah Mutahhari says in the second point in that article, this idea of materialist was explained, and he says that also in the fifth article we will have a discussion about how multiplicity comes in knowledge, پیدایش کثرت در علم. So all together we can say we have three important issues that we have dealt with in different parts of this book. ارزش معلومات, value of our knowledge. راه حصول علم, how we can come to know something. And third, تعیین حدود علم, to define the boundaries of knowledge. Ayatollah Mutahhari says European philosophers in the last 4 centuries have focused very much on these issues. So more than studying and writing about metaphysics, they have worked and written on not theory of knowledge or epistemology. So they have lots of discussions about knowledge, especially these 3 issues that we just mentioned: value of knowledge, how to obtain knowledge, and boundaries of knowledge. And he says he will try to mention briefly some of the ideas of European also philosophers, and then how Muslim philosophers have dealt with this issue. To make it simple, I don't want to go into that part about brief reference to ideas of philosophers. I will go directly to the issues that he discusses. I repeat for those who joined now, we are talking about introduction to the 4th article by Ayatollah Mutahhari. So we are not yet starting the text of Allama. This is the commentary, but as a muqaddama, prior to the main discussion. So in an organized way, Ayatollah Motahhari brings different topics. First, آیا حقیقت فی الجمله وجود دارد؟ Can we say that in general there is something as truth? We are not saying everything that we believe is true, but فی الجمله, partially, generally, is there any chance that we know something? The second issue is, what's the criteria for distinguishing between truth and falsehood? میزان تشخیص حقیقت از خطا چیست؟ The third issue that we will inshallah discuss is that, is it possible that something be both true and false? Because some people have said, such a thing is possible. We want to see whether it's really possible or it's a mistake. The fourth issue is truth permanent or temporary? آیا حقیقت موقت است یا دائمی؟ The next issue is, آیا حقیقت متحول و متکامل است؟ This is the fifth issue. Is truth something which evolves, goes through evolution and changes, or truth can be fixed? The sixth is, why empirical knowledge is not certain and empirical sciences are not certain. چرا علوم تجربی یقینی نیست? And I don't think we would reach the seventh topic today, but just to have it in mind, the seventh is truth absolute or relative? With some of you that we had a course on moral philosophy, we talked about ethical relativism. Now let's start with the first one. So I gave you a kind of outlines for our discussion today. The very first thing that Ayatollah Motahhari studies is, آیا حقیقت فی الجمله وجود دارد? Is truth available, even partially? He says the idea that human knowledge, human understanding is at least in some cases true is self-evident. We don't want to say بالجمله. You are all familiar with this. In Hausa we use this, terminology of فی الجمله and بالجمله. بالجمله means موجبه کلیه, means 100% of the cases. But فی الجمله means some of the cases are like this. Even doesn't say majority. فی الجمله means sometimes, some cases. It can be equal, it can be majority, minority. It doesn't specify. So we don't want to say بالجمله all our ideas and beliefs and all types of knowledge that we have are true. But فی الجمله, some of them. And this is badihi, this is self-evident. And you cannot actually prove this. There is nothing more fundamental than this, which is known to us, and we can use it to argue for this. So What would be the opposite position when you say fil jumle موجبه جزئیه? So some of them are like this, some of them are true. The opposite would be salebe kulliye, that someone says none of our understanding and knowledge and sciences is true. This is what, idealist in the sense which is used in this book, because idealist can be used in different senses. So to say all our understanding sciences are wrong, this is false and it is badihi. Or to say some of them are true, this is true and it's badihi. Allama says, Ayatollah Mutahhari says, بر همه کس در نهایت وضوح هویداست و احتیاج به استدلال ندارد. Because there is a discussion, what is badihi? Is something that doesn't need argument or doesn't have argument. So here Ayatollah Mutahhari says it doesn't need argument. It's so clear that doesn't need any argument. And then he says balke. Then he goes further and says بلکه استدلال بر این مطلب محال و غیر ممکن است. Not only doesn't need argument, it's impossible to bring any proof, any argument for that. For example, he says some of the truths, some of the self-evident things that we mentioned in second article about fitriyat. You are familiar already, we discussed this in this course, fitriyat. One of the 6 types of badihiyat is fitriyat. Qadaya qiyasatuha ma'aha. So Ayatollah Mutahhari says these kind of propositions, fitriyat, are available even in minds of Sufis who deny knowledge. But in their heart, in their life, they use such badihiyat. He says سوفسطایی واقعی، یعنی کسی که نسبت به همه چیز مردد یا منکر باشد یافت نمیشه. You cannot find a true Sufist, a full-fledged Sufist, because in discussions they deny, but when they become hungry, they go to fridge or kitchen, take something and eat. They don't say maybe this kitchen doesn't exist, maybe this fridge doesn't exist, maybe the food doesn't exist, maybe I don't exist, maybe hunger is not true. No, they act like other people. Then he says Sufis and idealists very much quote and refer to and rely on and adhere to occurrence of errors in our perception and our rational understanding, his wa aql. In our perception and in our intellectual understanding, they say, look, there were mistakes. This shows that nothing is reliable. But Ayatollah Mutahhari says in the second article, when we answered to the second shubha objection, we said that actually I also have said this many times in this course, actually one of the things that is a blessing, or you can say is a starting point, is the fact that we know that there are mistakes and errors. Because if you have no access to the truth, no access to the reality, how can you say there are mistakes and say because there are mistakes so there is no truth? No, actually, because there is truth, you were able to understand certain things were false. If truth and falsehood were based, for example, on our desires or taste, then we couldn't say it's true or false. For example, someone loves color brown, someone loves green, someone loves purple. So if the one who loves green says, I love green, the other one says, I love brown, is there any mistake, any error? No. Because there is no fixed reality as such that which color is better or which color should be liked. It depends on the taste of people, opinion of people. But when you say that, for example, the idea that, for example, the earth was flat was wrong, or the idea that earth is the center of the world was wrong, so it means that this is not based on taste or opinion. It's not fiction, it's a fact. Yes, we misunderstood, but then you made progress. You understood that this was a mistake, this was an error. So he says, خود همین پی بردن به خطا دلیل بر این است که یک سلسله حقایق مسلمه در نزد ماست که آنها را معیار و مقیاس قرار داده ایم و از روی آنها به خطاهایی پی برده ایم. The fact that we are understanding our errors and mistakes shows that we have certain things in our understanding that we are sure about them. We use them as the basis, as the measure, as criteria, check other things against them, and then we realize that, for example, there was mistake. So you have made some progress. So what we can do here is just تنبیه و توجه دادن. تنبیه in this context is different from what we use in Farsi. Sometimes in Farsi, or most of the time in Farsi, when we say تنبیه کردن, means to discipline. And it brings to mind, it's not necessary, but that by force. Normally, when we say, for example, the parent, for example, تنبیه کردن their children, means they discipline by force. But this is not the literal meaning of تنبیه. In Arabic, تنبیه means to warn and create a kind of awareness and alertness, to make the other person متنبه, means alert and aware. Actually, Nabi is someone that he himself is alert and conscious. He doesn't need tanbih. But if someone is not Nabi, then you need to sometimes awaken them. So here tanbih doesn't mean to use force and beat them up so that they understand. No, means توجه دادن. He himself says تنبیه و توجه دادن. We want to make them go back and restart. We start the system of understanding and see things properly. Otherwise, he says, we cannot argue. We cannot prove, because as scholars have said, if someone denies all the principles, all the facts which are agreed on, by tongue, of course, he says, because in reality they cannot deny. But if someone says, I don't accept this, I don't accept this, then we cannot use any argument for them. Because every argument has some premises and some prerequisites that they can deny them as well. He says one of the materialists has used some scientific theories, like the theory of Laplace about physics and about Earth and Sun, and they say according to these theories in physics, there have been millions of years of change and transformation in this world, in this nature, and how can you say the world doesn't exist? So if physics says that, this world, the natural world, physical world, is existing for millions of years. Ayatollah Mutahari says this is not a good argument, because this person doesn't believe in physics and doesn't believe in scientists and doesn't believe in these theories. If he wants to insist that the whole idea that we have about the world and ourselves is illusion and there is nothing there, how can then they accept the theories in physics? So what we need is to make them aware, alert. If anything helps, like studying science, if helps them to wake up, yes, but it cannot be a proof, because if they don't accept anything, they can question this as well. So he says in the text, Allama Tabatabai has explained that the purpose of bringing argument against claims of Sufis is not to prove that they are wrong. It's just to clarify issues that they raise. They make shubahat, we want to clarify. In the article, Allama explains that there is no knowledge without مکشوف. So هیچ علمی بی مکشوف نیست و هیچگاه قوای ادراک کننده در کار خود اشتباه نمی کنند. So it's not that there is any knowledge, any understanding which has no subject, or say our faculties for understanding make mistake 100%. No, we will explain where mistakes happen. If you see that, for example, this is my example. For example, see, you put a pen in a glass of water. You put half of the pen in the water. When you look, you see it's bending. But when we bring the pen out, it's straight, it's not bending. So we say this is a mistake. But where is mistake coming from? Is mistake in our senses? Our eye is making mistake and our nafs is making mistake, or mistake is in interpretation? Otherwise it really looks like bending. Even with camera, maybe you can record it and again show it to other people. They say also it's bending. But as a fact, it's not bending. So we will explain where mistakes come from. This was about fil jumla. So we believe fil jumla reality can be understood. We have truth. It's not in need of proof. It's not in need of arguing. It's actually not possible to argue, but everyone understands. For example, they understand qazayay fitriya. The second thing is, what is the measure, what's the criteria for distinguishing between truth and falsehood? He says, after badihiyat, after self-evident propositions which are obviously true, then we reach propositions that are not very clear to us. We need to think and reason, do reasoning. Yeah? Istidlal, fikr are needed. And it's also known to us that sometimes we make mistakes. So what's the thing that we can use? he says مقیاس و معیار تشخیص حقیقت از خطا منطق نامیده می شود. The criteria, or you can say the measure that we use is mantiq, is logic. The most famous one is mantiq suri, formal logic, which was developed or compiled. Not that he created this is the way mind works, but he was able to compile. Aristotle. ارسطو موفق به جمع و تدوین آنها شده. It existed before, and even as a science, ideas were there, but Aristotle was able to compile and organize and develop them. Some people have questioned in Europe logic of Aristotle. Some people like Descartes and Hegel, they say, we can have new logic, modern logic or new logic. These are things that are going to be discussed in the article. So he says we don't need to go into detailed discussion now in the introduction. If you remember when we define mantiq, logic, we say آلة قانونية تعصم مراعاتها الذهن عن الخطأ في الفكر. It's exactly what Ayatollah Mutahari says, that mantiq is a kind of instrument, is alatun. But what kind of ala, what kind of tool or instrument? Is it from metal, from steel, from wood? No. Alatun qanuniyatun. It's a set of rules and regulations and laws that if we observe them, mura'atuha, if we observe them, it will save and protect us, our mind, and then from khata fil fikr, mistake in reasoning. So we need to reason because not everything is badihi. But reasoning needs guidance and guidelines which come from logic. The third issue is it possible that something be both true and false? You may be surprised why we ask this. It's obvious it's not possible. But unfortunately some people have said this. So he says حقیقت و خطا or صحیح و غلط or صدق و کذب. So reality opposite to for example khata can be mistake, can be falsehood, error. So but if you use it against haqiqa, so maybe it can be falsehood. Khata ya sahih, something is true or false. Anyway, these are opposite to each other. If something is true, it's not false. If it's false, it's not true. For example, we say earth goes around sun. Either this is true or false. You cannot say it's both true and false, or neither true nor false. There are only two options, true and false. There's no third option. Aristotle was a student of Plato. Either this is true or false. You cannot say true and false. But unfortunately, some people recently, in our age, contemporary, some contemporary writers who believe in dialectic materialism, they say everything has its own opposite. they have a principle of وحدت ضدین. They always believe that everything and its opposite, thesis and antithesis, always are there. So if something is true, it's also false. If it's false, it's also true, because opposite things exist. But this is not possible, and maybe because of some mistakes, some confusion, or some interests, they are saying this. Otherwise, when a child goes to primary school, طفل دبستانی would understand that this is not possible. There is something that sometimes scientists say about theories or hypotheses, which are huge, big theories, which have many, elements, many parameters. Yes, because they are compound theories, some parts can be true, some parts can be false, therefore they need modification. So in a combination of few or tens or hundreds, but even few propositions as a theory, as a hypothesis, it's possible that some of them are true, some of them are false. But not that one single claim or proposition can be both true and false. So this is about number 3. Number 4, is truth permanent or temporary? If you study logic by Aristotle, if you study Sana'atul Burhan, if you study philosophy, you find they emphasize on the fact that haqa'iq, the truths, are permanent. For example, Sheikh al-Rais, Abu Ali Sina, in the section on logic from Shifa, as you know, Shifa has ilahiyat, has tabi'iyat, has also mantiq. He has discussed and he has shown that truth is permanent. Dawam and continuity are there for truth. But some people have said no. Some of the contemporary, especially some materialists, they thought that truth can be temporary, and they say those who say truth is permanent, they are rigid in their thinking. They are not, flexible. They are not creative. They are insisting on something forever. They don't have dynamism. So Ayatollah Mutahhari says, what do you mean by this? If you want to say, because they mention, there is change in the nature, etc. If you want to say that things which exist in the nature are changeable, of course, philosophers have no difficulty. Even Mullah Sadra believes in harakat jawhari, substantial motion. We don't have issue with this. But what we say is that knowledge is not changeable. Yeah. For example, you have seen a child 10 years ago. Now, this child is a young person. This child has changed over 10 years, even over few days. You can sometimes see difference. At least a few weeks or sometimes few days, you can see the difference. 10 years have passed, so the child has changed. We don't have any issue with this. It's obvious. But what I came to know about this child 10 years ago can still be true or not. If it was true, it still is true. For example, 10 years ago, he had certain height or weight. Still, that fact is there. Not that now he has the same height and weight. No, we are not saying now. معلوم has changed. But ilm is like a picture that you take of something and it remains forever. Aristotle was a student of Plato. Has this changed after thousands of years? No. More than 2,000 years ago, he was a student of Plato. Still, he's a student of Plato. So, knowledge doesn't change. Some people who have different understanding of truth, then they should, give their own answer. For us is what we said. But for example, someone like Auguste Comte, he had the idea that truth is what all minds agree upon. So something was true. Now, after some years, 100 years, for example, people change their mind. That thing is no longer true. But I add, even here, still you can say that 100 years ago that was true. Yes, that sentence has changed. For example, slavery was good, now slavery is not good. But you can still say that 100 years ago, slavery for them was good. So, we don't accept the idea that truth is temporary. Then the next thing is that, is truth evolving and changing? It's related to the previous question. آیا حقیقت متحول و متکامل است؟ So, what do you mean? This is also an area that some people have misunderstood. Every single truth remains the same. For example, I knew that Aristotle was a student of Plato. This remains the same. But I may come to know more about the relation of Aristotle and Plato. For example, that when Aristotle was 18 years old, he started to learn from Plato. For 20 years, he learned from Plato. Plato used to call him Aql. Among his students, he was considering Aristotle as the intellect. Or, for example, about academia that they used to, study. So, my knowledge can increase about the relation. But this is not evolution of knowledge in the sense that one fact, one truth which was explained in a proposition has evolved. No, more facts are known. So if you are careful and use terms carefully, you would not say that truth is evolving. Yes, you can say we can know more truth. In empirical sciences also there is another sense, in addition to knowing more, that they can use because of the nature of empirical sciences. In empirical sciences, normally they cannot, establish truth with certainty, yeah? But what they do is that they observe few things or experiment, and then they present a hypothesis. If that hypothesis has some ability and has some evidence, becomes a theory. Either this theory gets more evidence or another theory comes with a stronger evidence and takes over. So this science is improving. Sometimes theories replace each other. But this evolution or development in medicine, in biology, physics, chemistry, this is not the same as saying truth is evolving. No, it's not truth evolving. Just scientists in that field have come up with a better theory or with more evidence. Yes, so some new things can become known to them, or some stronger theories can replace weaker theories. But truth is not changing, so truth is not going to become better or worse, stronger or weaker. Truth is truth. Either it is truth or it's not truth. Number 6, why empirical sciences are not certain. This is a long discussion, but I think it's not difficult for you, because the claims that they can make, if they want to make it general, it's not possible to be proved through experiments. Istiqra can never be complete for them, induction. Why? Because the maximum is to say that in the ordinary or in these specified circumstances that we have created in the lab, our experience shows that this happens. But they cannot say in all circumstances, in all places of in the world, in the past, in present, in future, this is going to happen. They need to use some philosophical arguments so that they can make a general law. Otherwise, science cannot make general law. And as I said, normally they offer some hypotheses, then they have evidence, that they propose some theories, and these theories can over time change. Even something that also interesting, Ayatollah Mutahari says, sometimes a wrong theory can have some benefits. In science, for example, when they said Earth is center of the world and sun goes around this Earth, still that kind of understanding of the world is very useful. They could understand many things about seasons, about moon eclipse, sun eclipse, through that. Even today, still, for calculations, they assume that Earth is the center. So you cannot say, because this theory works and has some benefit in practice, this is true. Then, if empirical sciences are not certain, why philosophy and mathematics are certain? And Ayatollah Mutahari says this needs some discussions, some philosophical principles, and they are discussed in the 5th article in this book, پیدایش کثرت در علم, as we said at the beginning. We will discuss how knowledge is expanded and multiplied. Then, number 7, we'll leave it for the next session. This is truth relative or absolute? In my book, Ethical Relativism, I have a discussion about truth in general. Is it relative or absolute? And then is it, what about moral truth? Is moral truth relative or absolute? So I have discussed both general truth, to say there is no absolute truth. Every truth is relative, even outside ethics. Some people say this, some people say no. When it comes to other areas, we don't have any issue, but in akhlaq, in ethics, we have issue. I have discussed both in my book, Ethical Relativism. Inshallah, we'll have a short discussion about this in the next week. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.